I don't scare easily. I drive a lot, usually late at night, since I work odd hours and my friends are scattered across a couple counties. I've gotten used to long stretches of road in the dark, the kind where it feels like you're the only person in the world. Empty highways, soft hum of tires on asphalt, static on the radio. Most people find it eerie, but I've always found it kind of peaceful. At least I used to. This happened earlier this year, sometime in late spring. I had been visiting a close friend who lives about 30 minutes away, just over in the next county. It was a chill evening. Pizza, a couple movies, nothing wild. I left their place a little after 1 in the morning. The route home takes me along a major highway that cuts through some low mountains. During the day, it's packed with trucks and commuters, but at night it's almost dead. Just miles of empty road, winding through dark hills and thick patches of forest on either side. No street lights, no rest stops until you get closer to town. Just road, black sky, and trees. I drive a Jeep, not some massive off-road monster, just a standard SUV, but it's reliable. I'm not a fast driver either. My friends joke that I drive like a grandma, and I guess they're not wrong. I usually sit in the far right lane and do maybe 5 over the limit at most. That night was no different. I had music on low, windows cracked to let the cool air in, and I was just cruising, kind of zoned out. The road was empty for what felt like forever. I might have passed 2 or 3 cars total in the first 15 minutes. Nothing strange, just another quiet drive home. Then I noticed headlights in my rear view. Far back at first, like the tiniest glint of light. I didn't think much of it, just another late-night driver. But within seconds, it was like the lights grew 10 times brighter. The car was flying up behind me, fast. I figured they'd pass me on the left like anyone else, but they didn't. Instead, they came right up behind me and stayed there. I mean, right on my bumper. No exaggeration. I couldn't even see their headlights in my mirror anymore. Just this blinding glow flooding through my back window. I was in the right lane, like always. I hadn't cut anyone off, hadn't switched lanes. I don't even remember passing anyone in the last 10 minutes. It was just me and this car now. I kept driving, figuring they'd get tired and go around, but they didn't. I tapped my brakes lightly, just enough to flash my brake lights, thinking maybe they didn't realize how close they were. Still nothing. I slowed down gradually, from 70 to 60, then 50, but they stayed glued to me. It was like they were locked on. At that point, I got nervous. I know this stretch of road like the back of my hand, and there weren't any exits for a while. Just guardrails, forest, and those little reflector posts. I didn't want to speed up and risk a ticket or worse, especially with all the curves ahead. I tried slowing even more, down to 40, then 30. Still no change. I was practically crawling at 20 now, and this person refused to pass. They had plenty of chances. The left lane was wide open. I even nudged my tires onto the shoulder to make it clearer. Nothing. It started to feel wrong. Not just aggressive driving, but something else. I can't explain it, but the longer they stayed behind me, the heavier the feeling got in my chest. Like I was being hunted. I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter than I needed to. My fingers started going numb. I kept glancing in the mirror, trying to catch a glimpse of the driver, but the lights were too bright. Just this anonymous glare bearing down on me. Finally, I saw an exit coming up. Not one I usually take. There's nothing really there, just some back roads and a patch of overgrown grass between the off-ramp and the highway. No gas stations, no businesses. But I had a plan. I figured if I got off the highway and they followed, I'd know for sure this wasn't some coincidence. And if they did follow, I could maybe shake them off. As I approached the ramp, I slowed down even more and signaled like I was exiting. Sure enough, the car followed. No hesitation. That's when my stomach dropped. I took the ramp slow until just before the guardrail started on the side, and then I yanked the wheel hard right and drove straight into the grassy patch, bouncing over uneven ground and cutting straight across the field to the highway entrance again. The Jeep handled it fine. It's made for that kind of thing, but I could hear the undercarriage scraping once or twice. I didn't care. I just needed to get away. I glanced back as I hit the on-ramp again and saw the sedan still on the exit, stopped at the start of the guardrail. They hadn't followed me into the grass. I guess they couldn't. That gave me just enough time to put distance between us. I floored it, probably hit 90, which I never do, and raced toward the next exit. There's a stretch of town down there with street lights, shops, and most importantly, a long divider between directions. One of those concrete Jersey walls that's impossible to cross over unless you go to a proper intersection. At the bottom of the exit, I passed a couple lights and found the divider. I yanked the wheel again, made the fastest U-turn I could manage without flipping over, and started heading back the way I came. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think straight. I kept checking every mirror, looking for those headlights, half expecting to see them coming up fast again. But then I saw the car. It was still on the other side of the divider, heading toward where I had just come from. They had followed me down the ramp but hadn't realized I had doubled back. They were stuck. No way to turn around quickly without hitting a light or intersection. I had just enough time to disappear. I kept driving in the opposite direction for a couple more miles until I hit a gas station that I knew always had a few police cars parked out front. It's like their unofficial coffee stop, especially late at night. I pulled in, parked near the front door, and just sat there in the lot under the lights for a long while. I didn't see the sedan again. I waited a good half hour, maybe more, watching the highway, waiting for them to circle back or show up. But they never did. Eventually, I calmed down enough to finish the drive home. I stuck to well-lit streets and back roads the rest of the way. I never got a good look at the driver. I never saw the plate, never saw the make or model beyond knowing it was a smaller, low-to-the-ground sedan. But I remember those headlights, way too bright, too white, the kind of aftermarket lights that blind everyone else on the road. I haven't driven that highway alone at night since then. I'll take the long way through town or wait until morning, even if it means wasting gas or getting home later. I don't know what they wanted. Maybe it was just someone trying to mess with me, or maybe something worse. I think a lot about what might have happened if I had taken my usual exit, if I had led them straight to my neighborhood, my driveway, my house. I don't like thinking about it too long. It was late October, just starting to get cold enough at night that the windows fog up when you drive. I remember that because I had wiped a small circle in the windshield with my hand so I could see out better instead of waiting for the defroster to kick in. It was just past midnight, maybe 12:15 or 12:30. I had left my place to go see a girl I was seeing at the time. She was doing an overnight shift at a small hospital about 25 minutes from where I lived. We hadn't been seeing each other long, maybe a month, but we were at that point where any excuse to see each other felt worth it. She had texted saying it was a quiet night and I should come by just to talk or keep her company for a little while during her break. I didn't even think twice about it. The route I took was all residential back roads. I liked it better than the highway at that time of night. Less stress, fewer cars. There was this one part of the drive, a neighborhood with a four-way stop right in the middle of an intersection with no streetlights, just the faint glow from a few porch lights on the surrounding houses. I remember approaching that intersection. I even remember slowing down. I remember checking both ways. I remember the tap-tap of my turn signal. Then nothing. Absolutely nothing. No sudden impact. No dizziness. No flashing lights. Just gone. Next thing I know, I'm standing barefoot in someone's front yard. It was pitch black except for the glow from a nearby porch and the soft yellow streetlights maybe half a block down. I was about 40 feet away from my truck, which was still running in the middle of the intersection. The driver's side door was wide open, and my shoes and socks were tossed on the ground next to it, like I had taken them off in a hurry or maybe even while walking. The truck was in park, engine humming quietly, headlights on. I didn't know where I was at first. That moment, when your brain turns back on but the rest of the world doesn't line up yet, is the part that messes me up the most. It was like waking up mid-dream but being unable to remember what you were dreaming about. My hands were shaking. My feet were freezing from the cold dew on the grass. And then I heard the yelling. A woman's voice, angry but scared, shouting from her front door. She was holding back a kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old, and yelling something like, "What is wrong with you? What the hell are you doing?" And honestly, I couldn't blame her. I must have looked insane. A grown man standing barefoot in her yard in the middle of the night with a running vehicle abandoned in the intersection? I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, trying to understand what had happened, trying to ground myself. I looked around like maybe someone had come with me, like I was going to find someone else responsible for what was happening. But it was just me. Eventually, I snapped out of it enough to realize how it all looked. I muttered out a bunch of apologies, hands raised like I was surrendering. I backed away slowly, went back to my truck, and just stood there for a second looking at my socks and shoes on the ground like they didn't belong to me. I picked them up, sat down in the driver's seat, and put them back on one by one, all while the engine ran and the cold air blew in through the open door. I didn't go to the hospital after that. I just drove home, every second of that ride wide awake and full of adrenaline. I kept looking in the rearview mirror like I expected someone to follow me or like I'd catch a glimpse of something I missed. I got home, sat in my driveway with the engine off, and just stared at my hands on the steering wheel until they stopped shaking. When I went inside, I didn't sleep. I tried to look at my phone to see if I had texted or called anyone during that time. Nothing. No apps opened, no outgoing calls, no weird messages. I checked the clock and tried to backtrack the time. From what I could tell, it had been maybe 15 to 20 minutes between when I should have hit that intersection and when I came to in the yard. But it could have been longer. I honestly can't be sure. I kept trying to make sense of it. I wasn't drunk. I hadn't taken anything. I hadn't even had caffeine that night. I wasn't stressed or emotional. It wasn't a panic attack. It wasn't a seizure, at least not in any way I've heard seizures described. I didn't fall. I wasn't on the ground. I wasn't dizzy or disoriented in the physical sense, just mentally blank, like the reel of my life skipped ahead and forgot to tell me. I told the girl the next day that something came up and I couldn't make it. I never told her the real reason. I didn't even tell any friends about it for months. Eventually, I did bring it up to a doctor during a checkup. She referred me to a neurologist who ran a bunch of tests, MRI, EEG, even blood work. Everything came back fine. I didn't have any history of anything like this. No family history of neurological disorders. The neurologist chalked it up to a transient episode, something that maybe happened once and never again. A fluke. I wanted to believe that, but I still think about it every day. It's not just the fear of it happening again, though that's there too. It's the complete lack of answers. The unknown. I can't explain what happened to me. I have no memory of what I did in that time. Did I walk into her yard slowly? Did I run? Did I speak? Did I scream? Did I look confused or angry or out of it? What did that woman see that made her yell like that and shield her kid? Whatever she saw, it wasn't right. It wasn't normal. And the fact that my truck was put in park, the fact that I had the awareness, somewhere inside that blackout, to put it in park and take off my shoes and socks. Why? That part haunts me. I don't sleep with socks on, sure. I don't even like wearing shoes in my house. But why would I take them off outside? In the cold, in a stranger's yard. Some nights, when I think about it too long, I convince myself maybe I just had some kind of fugue state. Maybe my brain snapped for a second and walked me into someone's yard. Maybe I was sleep deprived and didn't realize how much. But none of that feels like an answer. I've had bad nights of sleep before. I've had stress and exhaustion. But nothing like this. Nothing close. It never happened again. Not even once. Not even a dizzy spell. I've gone on long drives since, past that same intersection dozens of times, and nothing. It's like my body and mind just decided to remove that night from my life and never explain why. But I remember everything up to the stop sign. I remember the sound of the turn signal. I remember the way the houses looked in the dark. And I remember the exact feeling in my chest when I realized I didn't know where I was or how I had gotten there. That feeling has never left. It happened to my mom's friend a few years ago. She was driving through the countryside in Portugal, on one of those long, empty highways that stretch between small towns. It was late in the afternoon, one of those dry, overcast days where the light feels dull and tired. She had been on the road for a couple of hours already, heading back home after visiting some distant relatives. The area she was driving through was remote. No buildings around, no gas stations, barely even a road sign. Just patches of trees and long stretches of empty land. She told my mom later that she noticed a car behind her about 20 minutes before the crash. At first, it seemed normal, just another car on the road, but then it started to feel off. The car was a bit too close, not tailgating exactly, but enough that it made her glance at the rearview mirror more often than usual. It was a dark-colored sedan, old model. Nothing about it stood out except for how persistent it was. No matter how fast or slow she went, it kept the same distance. After a while, it moved into the left lane to overtake her. That should have been the end of it. But just as it started to pass, it suddenly jerked right in front of her, completely cutting her off. She slammed on the brakes and instinctively turned the wheel to avoid hitting it. That's when she lost control. The car spun off the road and crashed into a tree. The front was crushed, the airbags deployed, and she blacked out almost immediately. She didn't know how long she was unconscious. Could have been minutes, could have been longer. When she came to, everything felt foggy. Her head was throbbing, and her vision was blurred. Her legs were pinned under the dashboard, and the seatbelt had locked up across her chest. She couldn't move much, just turn her head a little. Her ears were ringing, and the smell of burnt rubber and leaking fluids was strong. The windshield was shattered, and she could feel the air from outside coming in through it. She said that not long after waking up, a group of men approached the car. She couldn't tell exactly how many, maybe 4 or 5. They were speaking quickly, not Portuguese. Later, she recognized it as Brazilian Portuguese. They sounded urgent but not panicked, calm like they knew what they were doing. One of them crouched near the driver's side window, trying to get her attention. They didn't try to pull her out or anything, just told her to stay still, that help was on the way. One of them walked out of her line of sight, probably to make a call. She drifted in and out of consciousness a couple of times. Her memory from that period is spotty, but she remembers feeling like everything was under control. The men were there, they were helping, and she didn't feel scared at that point. The pain was sharp in her leg and shoulder, but she felt like she just had to wait. Someone had called for help. She believed it, but when she finally woke up again, it was getting darker. This time, a single man was tapping on the passenger side window. He looked concerned, surprised even. She thought at first he was one of the same people who'd been there earlier, but when she mentioned the others, he looked confused. Said there was no one else, that the road had been empty when he found her. She asked if the ambulance was coming. He said he was calling now. He looked around and said it didn't look like anyone had been there before. When emergency services arrived, along with her husband who had been notified and had rushed to the scene, she was still dazed but awake. They pulled her out carefully and put her on a stretcher. On the way to the hospital, she kept talking about the group that helped her earlier. But the paramedics and her husband said no one had seen anyone else there. The first guy who found her had been the one to call for help, and no other cars had been seen on the road. No tire tracks nearby, no footprints around the car. First, she thought maybe she had imagined them. A head injury can do that. But then they checked the trunk. Everything was gone. Her camera bag, laptop, some cash, a suitcase with some personal things. Even small stuff like her charger and a travel pouch. Everything had been taken except for what was right in the front with her. The glove box had been opened, the center console emptied. They hadn't even rushed. They took their time. That's when it all started to click. The car that had cut her off, the one that caused the crash, it was probably the same people who came later. She thinks they followed her on purpose, that it wasn't just bad driving or a random accident. They waited until she was in the most remote part of the highway. They caused the crash deliberately, knowing it would disable her. Then they came back, pretended to help, and looted everything while she was too injured and dazed to stop them. The fake kindness, the staged concern, it was all part of it. She felt ashamed for a long time after, said she couldn't believe she didn't see through it. But the truth is, they were smart. They didn't panic, didn't rush. They were calm, professional even, like they'd done this before. She gave a statement to the police, of course, gave every detail she could remember, but there wasn't much to go on. No license plate, no solid descriptions, just a vague recollection of their faces and the sound of their accents. Police said they had seen similar cases, but no arrests were made. Too remote, too few witnesses, too little evidence. She never got her stuff back. The insurance covered the car, most of the electronics, but not the personal things. Some of what she lost can't be replaced. Photos, notes, a journal she kept during the trip. She says the material things didn't matter much, but it changed how she saw the world, how she trusted people. She never drives alone in unfamiliar areas anymore, and if she does, she always shares her location with someone. She checks her mirrors more often, pays attention to who's behind her, looks at faces longer than she used to. I didn't really believe these kinds of stories before. It always sounded like urban legends, the kind of thing people exaggerate, but I saw how it affected her. She's not someone who lies or makes things up. She didn't add anything dramatic, didn't claim anything supernatural. Just a group of people who took advantage of a crash they caused, pretended to be helpers, and left her stranded and bleeding with nothing. It didn't happen in a dark alley. It wasn't the middle of the night. It was a normal afternoon on a quiet road. And it's not the kind of story you see in the news, because nothing about it sounds strange at first. But it stuck with me, because it's not just about what happened, it's about how easily it did. How fragile that line is between safety and danger, between someone helping you and someone pretending to, and that's what really gets under your skin. Not the crash, not the theft, but the fact that, for a while, you believed they were there to save you. I remember that night more clearly than almost anything else in my life. Started like any other evening. My wife had gone over to her parents' house, which she'd been doing more often lately. Her dad had been having health issues, not anything instantly life-threatening, but bad enough that she wanted to be around to help when she could. Her parents' place was a modest, single-story house in a quiet neighborhood. One of those places where nothing ever really happens. The kind of spot people raise families and leave their doors unlocked without a second thought. Except my wife and her parents didn't play that game. The doors were always locked. Always. She called me when she got there. Nothing unusual in her voice. Said she'd just gotten inside and was gonna hang out in the front room for a bit. That room by the door with the computer setup. It's small, just big enough for a couple of desks, a chair, and a cat tree by the window. They had a few cats, but her cat, Charlie, was the oldest and by far the chillest of the bunch. This was a cat who didn't care about anything. I'd seen him get a bath and look mildly annoyed but otherwise unbothered. I watched a squirrel throw a pecan at him once while he was lying in the grass and he didn't even flinch, just blinked. So when she told me what happened next, it didn't make any sense at first. She said she was sitting at the computer, scrolling through social media, just killing time. The rest of the house was quiet. Her mom and dad had gone out, probably to the pharmacy or something, and it was just her there for a while. Charlie wandered in like he always did. She didn't think anything of it at first. He came in slowly, like he was checking the corners of the room before stepping in fully. But then he just stood there, in the doorway, and didn't move any further. Then came the sound. That low, deep growl cats do when something's seriously wrong. Not the annoyed kind of hiss they give when another cat brushes past them. This was different. It was the kind of sound that makes the hair on your arms rise even if you don't know why. She said Charlie was growling, then hissing not at her, but at the hallway that led to the rest of the house. He positioned himself between her and the doorway like he was guarding her, like he was ready to pounce. This was a cat who had never even scratched the couch, let alone acted like he was about to fight someone. And now here he was, tense, tail puffed, eyes locked on the dark hallway, making noises like he was about to tear into something. She said she froze at first, tried to listen. Nothing. No sounds. No footsteps, no creaks, no whispers. Just Charlie, still hissing, still growling. Then something in her gut turned cold. That's how she described it later. Not fear, not even anxiety. Just this deep, gnawing instinct that said something was wrong. Something bad. She didn't call out. She didn't go look. She just reached down, scooped up Charlie, and walked out of the house without turning around. Left the lights on. Didn't even lock the front door. Just walked straight out like the place was on fire. She had barely reached the sidewalk when she saw the cop car roll slowly down the street. They weren't in any rush, just cruising like they were looking for something or someone. She flagged them down and told them what had happened, the whole story about Charlie, the way he was acting, the weird silence in the house, the feeling that something was off. She told them the back door should have been locked. Always was. They didn't laugh. Didn't tell her she was being silly or that she'd watched too many crime shows. They told her to get in the back seat of the cruiser and stay there. They pulled into the driveway and went in. She said those 10 minutes in the car felt like hours. The longer she sat there, the more real it all felt. The more her hands started to shake. Charlie had calmed down a little by then, curled up in her lap, but his ears were still pointed back, like he was still listening for something. She kept watching the door, waiting. When the officers came out, they didn't look casual anymore. They looked serious. One of them came back to the cruiser and told her they found the back door wide open. Not just unlocked, propped, like someone had gone out or come in and hadn't planned on closing it. No one should have been home. No reason for that door to be open. And that's when they told her something else. Apparently, they were rolling through the neighborhood because of an active search. A man had been spotted nearby, someone they believed was connected to multiple assaults in the surrounding counties. A serial offender, the worst kind. They'd gotten a tip that he might be in the area, possibly casing houses or even trying to break in. They hadn't expected to find anything that night. They were just patrolling when she flagged them down. If she hadn't walked out when she did, if Charlie hadn't reacted the way he did, if she had brushed it off as just a weird cat moment and gone to the kitchen for a drink, or to the bathroom, or to check the thermostat, it might have ended a lot differently. It might have ended badly. She filed a report that night. They took her statement, searched the house, but didn't find anyone. Whoever it was had probably run the second they heard the front door open. Or maybe even before that. We'll never know for sure. The officers said it was likely he had broken in through the back door, maybe thinking the house was empty, maybe watching to see who came and went. The way Charlie reacted, it's like he knew, before anything even happened, before any sounds, any sights, anything. And that's what stuck with us the most. Not the fact that someone had broken in, not even the fact that it might have been a dangerous predator. It was Charlie, that old, lazy, never give a damn cat. Something set him off, something he knew wasn't right, and he put himself between my wife and the danger. Not out of fear, not out of confusion, but because something deep in that animal told him to protect her. We changed the locks after that, installed cameras, motion sensors, everything. And Charlie? He got a whole shelf of his favorite treats, his own soft bed in every room, and more affection than he probably wanted. We never forgot what he did. My wife doesn't like to talk about it much, not because she's scared, but because it reminds her how close things came to going another way. That night still creeps in sometimes when she hears a sound at the window or when the cats act a little strange. But she always listens now, always checks, and we both agree on one thing without question: always trust the cat. About 4 years ago, I was driving my friend home from an out-of-state karate tournament. We had left later than we planned, and by the time we crossed back into North Carolina, it was already past midnight. The highways had long since thinned out and the GPS routed us through the back roads. For anyone who's never been out there, it's just miles and miles of farmland and woods. You can go 10-15 minutes without seeing a single house. At that hour, the world feels empty, like you're the last person alive. It was just the two of us in my car, windows rolled up, music low. My friend had leaned against the passenger seat with her knees pulled up, watching the moon through the glass. I was awake enough, running on caffeine and the sharp edge of adrenaline that always comes after long drives. The night was clear, the moon was bright, and the pavement under my tires cracked and groaned in the way old country roads do. There wasn't another soul around. We were maybe 40 minutes from her place when I came around a bend in the road and saw headlights flare in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. Someone else out late, maybe a farmer heading home or a night shift worker. But then those headlights came fast. Way too fast. The car closed the distance like it was hunting me and planted itself on my bumper. I eased off the gas a little, figuring they'd pass. That's what people usually do out there. Drive like maniacs until they can swerve around you. But this car didn't pass. It stayed locked on me, bright headlights filling my mirror so I couldn't see anything else. My stomach tightened. I nudged the accelerator. 65, then 70. The road was narrow, lined with tall grass and tree lines, but I pushed anyway, hoping I could shake them. The car behind me matched every move. Closer now. Too close. At 75, it felt like I couldn't even tap the brakes without being rear-ended. Minutes stretched longer than they should have. Every turn, every hill, every straightaway, they stayed behind me. Their headlights washed through the interior of my car like spotlights. My friend sat up straight and pulled her seatbelt tighter, eyes glued to the mirror. She wasn't saying anything, but I didn't need words. The air in the car was tight with fear. I thought about calling the cops, but my phone showed 1 bar, sometimes none. Out there, you can drive 20 miles with no reception. And even if I did get through, what was I supposed to say? That a car was following me? On a back road? With no cross streets or landmarks? Felt hopeless. My pulse hammered in my ears as I pushed faster. 80, 85. The tires hummed and shuddered on the cracked concrete. Every curve of the road felt like a coin toss between keeping control or losing it completely. I couldn't stop picturing a deer darting out. At that speed, we'd be dead before I could even hit the brakes. But slowing down wasn't an option. The car behind me mirrored everything, glued to me like a shadow. Time lost all shape. Could have been 10 minutes or an hour, I honestly couldn't tell. All I knew was the constant pressure of those lights on my back and the sharp burn in my chest from holding my breath too long. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I tried little tricks, slowing at curves to see if they'd swing past, drifting toward the middle to bait them into passing. Nothing worked. Whoever was driving wanted to stay behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of their engine in my rear window. The landscape around us didn't help. Every mile looked the same. Fences running along the road, the occasional cluster of trees, open fields glowing faintly in the moonlight. Not a single gas station, not a single house with a porch light, nothing. Just us and them. I kept thinking, if we wreck out here, no one is finding us until morning. After what felt like forever, we started to get close to her place. I recognized the long straightaway that led into her part of the county, where the woods started to close in thicker. My mind raced. If I pulled into her driveway, they could follow us in. Her driveway was long, wooded on both sides, and pitch black at that hour. If they followed us in, we'd be trapped. There'd be nowhere to go. I started to panic, trying to think of something, anything to do. I kept checking the glove box in my head. I had an ice pick in there, left over from using it on camping trips. I had a small pocket knife in my purse. Neither of those felt like much against whoever was behind us, but it was all I had. My friend sat stiff, knees pressed against the dashboard, silent but wide-eyed. She knew the same thing I did. Once we turned off, it would just be us, them, and the woods. Finally, we came to the last stop sign before her road. The pavement split into 2 lanes there, one leading into her neighborhood, one heading back toward the main highway and our hometown. I slowed, heart pounding, headlights still blazing in my mirror. My hands were slick with sweat on the wheel. I half expected them to rear-end me at the sign just to force my hand. Instead, as I braked, the car behind me eased into the lane beside mine. For the first time in 45 minutes, those headlights weren't directly in my mirror. My chest felt like it was going to explode. As they pulled up alongside me, I turned my head, bracing myself. Every nerve in my body was sure I was about to see a man with a gun. A masked face, some nightmare I'd never wake from. But then my eyes landed on the lettering on the side of the car. It was a county sheriff's deputy. The cruiser rolled up next to us slow, deliberate, like they wanted me to see it. I couldn't process it at first. My brain couldn't match the hours of terror with the idea that this was law enforcement. All I could do was stare as they paused, then rolled forward through the intersection and disappeared down the road toward town. I sat there at the stop sign, shaking so badly my foot almost slipped off the brake. My friend let out a sound, half a sob, half a laugh, and I realized my own hands were trembling against the wheel. We turned onto her road, headlights catching the trees, and crept down the long driveway like we were being hunted. When we finally parked in front of her house, I shut the engine off and sat in silence, staring at the dark woods pressing in on us. I've run through that night in my head 1,000 times since then. I still can't make sense of it. Why a deputy would tail 2 young women through the back roads for nearly an hour, never identifying themselves, never pulling me over, never passing, just sitting on my bumper until we nearly lost our minds. Maybe it was a power trip. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was something worse, something I don't even want to put into words. But what I know for sure is that fear was real. The danger felt real. And when I think about how close we came to pulling into that dark driveway with them right behind us, I feel sick. Because if they'd followed us in, there would have been no witnesses, no one around for miles. Just 2 girls alone in the woods with a deputy who had already proven he wasn't interested in protecting us. That was the night I stopped believing that a badge always meant safety. To this day, when I see headlights in my mirror on a back road, I can feel my chest tighten and my grip lock on the wheel, waiting for it all to happen again. I was a missionary in Brazil, about 19 years old, dumb and way too trusting. We were supposed to talk to strangers all day, so when this guy came up to us speaking fluent English, it was like a breath of fresh air. We were in a pretty rural area, lots of jungle, small towns, rough roads, dusty markets. My Portuguese was still crap, and I missed hearing my own language more than I realized. This guy, Bickford, looked like he had crawled out of a cave. Huge gray beard, ragged clothes, smelled like old trash and sweat. But he was friendly, almost too friendly. The kind of friendly where you smile but your stomach is telling you to leave. He said he was from the States too, and had been living in Brazil for decades. Just hearing someone say man and dude in an American accent made me trust him a little more than I should have. We started seeing him around town. He'd always run into us, near our apartment or down the block from the market. It wasn't until the 3rd or 4th time that we realized these weren't chance meetings. He was waiting for us. He asked for a copy of the Book of Mormon and said he liked learning about different religions. We were told to write down the names of everyone we taught, so we mentioned him in our weekly report to the local bishop. The second we said his name, the bishop looked up. One of the counselors leaned in, his face tight. "Stay away from that guy," they said. "He's not right. Every so often he shows up and starts bothering missionaries. Don't meet with him again." But my companion and I didn't believe them. They had to be overreacting. Bickford was weird, sure, but he hadn't done anything wrong. We thought maybe he was just a little off, lonely, maybe just someone looking for company. The more we met him, the more off he seemed. He'd never let us meet anywhere normal, always near abandoned buildings or down side streets. He'd never give us a phone number or address. One time he said he didn't have a phone, and then the next day mentioned getting a call. His stories never added up. He'd talk about having a wife and then say she died, then say she never existed. But we kept brushing it off. We weren't there to judge. We were there to teach. He started talking about his house in the jungle. Said it was peaceful, beautiful, quiet. No neighbors for miles. He'd smile wide when he talked about it, like it was his little piece of heaven. After a few weeks, he invited us to come see it. We were hesitant, but he said he'd meet us by the road, guide us there himself. We told ourselves we'd go, take a look, maybe leave a Book of Mormon, and be out before it got dark. We waited by the road that day, just where he said to meet. It was already late, sun low, the sky turning orange. We were about to leave when he appeared, like he'd stepped out of the trees. He didn't apologize for being late, just smiled, said, "Let's go," and turned into the brush. The trail was barely a trail at all. Waist-high plants grabbed at our legs. My flashlight was small, cheap. It barely cut through the dark. Spiders were everywhere. I hate spiders, not just a little, real, deep hate. I kept walking into webs, brushing them off my face, trying not to scream. The air was heavy, thick with heat and mosquitoes. The jungle sounds got louder the deeper we went. Chirps, rustles, things moving just out of sight. We walked for what felt like forever. At one point, I looked at my watch and realized we'd been walking over 40 minutes. No way should a house be this far in. But then the trees thinned, and we stepped into a clearing. That's when I realized we'd made a huge mistake. The house was a wreck. A wooden cabin, half of it collapsed in on itself. The roof sagged, the walls leaned. There were holes in the sides where you could see straight through. Bickford stood in front of it, arms wide, and said, "Welcome home." Then he walked in like it was nothing. Inside was worse. There was no furniture, not really, just piles of broken wood and trash. The air stank rot, mold, piss, something sour. On the stove, which didn't work and was rusted through, was a pot full of black, crusted food. You could smell it from the door. He showed us the room like he was proud of it, pointed to places where rats scurried across the floor. We could hear them in the walls too, chewing, scratching. Then I saw the writing. It was everywhere. Every wall, the ceiling, even the floor in places covered in chalk. Small, cramped handwriting, the same phrases over and over again. "Jesus will forgive me. I have to stop. I did it again." Each one had dates next to it. Some from years ago, some from a few weeks ago. Then there were names, dozens of names. Under each name was an age, 6, 9, 12. Under some of them were words I don't want to repeat, things no human being should ever write down. My skin went cold. My breath caught in my throat. My flashlight started to shake in my hand. I looked at my companion. His face was pale, mouth tight. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. We both knew we had to get out. I don't even remember what excuse we made. Something about curfew. We said we had to be back by a certain time. He looked disappointed, then smiled and said he'd show us a shortcut. He turned into the trees again, away from the path we'd taken, deeper into the jungle. Said it was quicker, but we knew it wasn't. We knew the trail was back the other way. We said no, we'd take the way we came. He argued, said it was better this way. We insisted, kept our voices calm, friendly. Inside I was screaming. Every alarm in my body was going off. We left, walked fast, didn't run but wanted to. I didn't care about the spiders anymore. I pushed through every web, took every branch to the face. I just wanted out. The air felt heavier than before. I kept checking behind me, expecting to see him following. But he didn't. Or maybe he did and we just didn't see him. When we finally hit the road, I almost collapsed. My legs were jelly. My shirt was soaked through with sweat. My companion looked at me and I saw it in his face. Pure, real fear. We didn't talk for a long time, just walked back to town in silence. Later that night, we called our leaders. They took it seriously, so seriously that within a week we were transferred out of the area. Packed our bags, said goodbye to no one. But before we left, we made sure to write down everything in the area book, the record that stays behind when missionaries move on. We wrote a full page about Bickford, told them not to meet with him, not to trust him, to stay away no matter what. I've never been that scared in my life. Not before, not since. I know how crazy it all sounds. I know how it reads like something out of a bad movie, but I lived it, every second of it. And just to be safe, after the second or third time we met him, I started recording everything. I had a cheap little digital camera that could do audio. I stick it in my pocket and let it run. The quality is awful, full of static and rubbing sounds, but it's real. It's proof that he existed, that it wasn't all in my head. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if we'd followed him into that jungle, if we'd taken that shortcut. I don't think we would have come back. I think he would have made sure of that. That was over a decade ago, but I still dream about it sometimes. The smell, the rats, the writing, his smile. There are people out there worse than monsters, and sometimes they look just like you. I'll tell you one that happened to me, or rather something I witnessed, and it stayed in my head ever since. It happened when I was visiting a friend of mine in New Rochelle, New York, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. It was just a normal night out, the kind of night where nothing special is supposed to happen. We went to this small bar he liked, not anything fancy, just a local place that served cheap drinks and had a decent jukebox. The night had been lighthearted, a few drinks in, talking about nothing serious, and I remember feeling loose, buzzed, and honestly in a good mood. At some point, we stepped outside for a cigarette. It was chilly, and the air had that damp feeling that you get near the water, a kind of sharpness in the lungs that makes you feel more awake. The street was quiet except for the occasional passing car. I remember leaning against the brick wall of the bar, hearing the muffled music coming from inside, and then the night just split wide open. Out of nowhere, a car came tearing past. It was going so fast it was almost a blur, headlights bouncing as it hit the uneven pavement. It blew straight through the red light like it wasn't even there, tires screeching as it swerved to get around the curve up ahead. I felt that drop in my stomach the way you do when you know something bad is about to happen, and sure enough, it happened in the span of just a few seconds. The road bent up into a hill with a sharp curve, and the car drifted straight into the oncoming lane. There was no time for anyone to react. Another car was coming down from the opposite direction, right in the path. They collided head-on. The sound was so loud it was like a bomb went off. Both vehicles jerked violently, back ends kicking up off the pavement before slamming back down. Glass shot everywhere like a spray of ice, and the echo of the crash rang out down the empty street. For a moment, everything was still except for the groaning metal. Then one of the cars, the one that had been driving normally, burst into flames almost immediately. The fire caught quick, crawling along the hood and then leaping higher. I don't think my brain fully processed it at first. It didn't feel real, it felt like watching a movie scene, only it was right in front of me. My body kicked into autopilot. I turned and ran back inside the bar, pushed through people, grabbed the fire extinguisher off the wall, and shouted for the bartender to call 911. I don't even remember thinking it through. It was just a blind reaction. A few people followed me out, including my friend. By then, the heat was already intense, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and burning plastic. I went straight for the burning car, tried to aim the extinguisher at the flames, but it was useless. The fire was too strong, too fast. The extinguisher hissed out its contents, but it didn't even make a dent. All it did was create a brief puff of white mist that disappeared instantly. The fire kept eating at the car, and the heat was unbearable. The closer I got, the more it felt like the skin on my face was being scorched. That's when the screaming started. It was the woman inside. She was alive. She was trapped in the driver's seat, and she was screaming as the fire spread around her. I don't think I'll ever be able to put into words what that sounded like. It wasn't just fear, it was pure agony, an animalistic kind of sound that cut right through the noise of the flames. Every second of it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I wanted to run forward, to smash the glass, to pull her out, anything, but the flames had already sealed her in. The heat alone made it impossible to get close. A few of us stood there, helpless, moving forward and back like idiots, trying to will ourselves into doing something, but there was nothing to do. The fumes were choking, the fire was roaring louder, and all we could do was stand there listening as her screams went on until, suddenly, they didn't. The silence after was almost worse than the sound itself. By the time the fire department showed up, it was already over. They doused the flames quickly, sprayed foam and water until there was nothing left but smoke hissing off the twisted frame. The firemen moved with practiced calm, but the smell, that thick chemical-burned stink, lingered in the air and clung to my clothes. The police corralled us back toward the bar, taking names and statements, trying to piece together what had happened. I gave them what I could, but my head was buzzing, like I was there and not there at the same time. My hands were shaking, and the extinguisher dust was still clinging to my fingers. The rest of that night blurred into a fog. I remember sitting back at the bar with a glass of water in front of me, not touching it, not saying much, just replaying the same 30 seconds in my head again and again. The speed of the car, the impact, the fire catching like dry kindling, the screams. Every detail kept looping, sharper than it had felt in the moment, like my brain was etching it in whether I wanted it or not. The next day, I checked the local news. I needed to know who she was, needed some piece of truth to attach to the horror of the night. What I found made it worse. She was a young woman, 20-something, driving home from work. She had been less than a block from her house. I think the article said she was either newly married or had just had a baby. That detail hit me hardest. She wasn't just some anonymous stranger in the dark. She was a person with a whole life waiting for her, with people who loved her, people who were probably sitting at home at that very moment waiting for her to walk through the door. The man who caused it all? He was drunk. Some rich guy from what I gathered. He'd been speeding, blowing through red lights, like the rules didn't apply to him. The news said he survived, lost a leg, but otherwise he was fine. Fine enough to live with the fact that he ended a life for nothing. I don't know if he ever served time. I went home not long after, and the whole story faded from the headlines the way these things always do, pushed aside for the next tragedy. But I never forgot it. What stuck with me more than anything was the sound. That scream. It's not like in movies where it's quick or dramatic. It was long, it was raw, and it was human in the most brutal way possible. Sometimes I hear it in my head when I'm falling asleep, sharp as it was that night. It made me realize how fragile everything really is. You can be blocks from home, thinking about your bed, your family, your tomorrow, and then someone else's stupidity rips it all away in a heartbeat. I've never looked at drinking and driving the same since then. I've never looked at driving the same, period. Roads at night feel different to me now, every headlight an unknown. I think about her and about how none of us could do anything, not one useful thing, even though we tried. And I think about how unfair it all was, how the man who caused it got to walk away alive, while she never made it home. It's been years, but I can still see the fire lighting up the street, can still feel the heat pushing me back, can still hear the silence that came after the screaming stopped. That night carved itself into me, and I know I'll carry it for the rest of my life.